Chosen one, chosen from the cradle signs that show your purpose since childhood. Have you ever felt that strange sense of not belonging, even in the rooms you helped build? That feeling isn't random. It's recognition. Chosen one, chosen from the cradle. Signs that show your purpose since childhood. Since the beginning of time, a silent war has been waged, one between darkness and light, between truth and deception. And in the midst of this battle, certain individuals have been marked, chosen, and set apart for a divine purpose. But here's the shocking reality that changes everything. Most of them never realize it. They go through life struggling, questioning, feeling that persistent emptiness, even after achieving what the world calls success. They reach their 50s and 60s with impressive careers, raised families, built retirement accounts, yet something still whispers, there was more you were meant to do. What if that whisper isn't midlife crisis? What if it's recognition? What if you were one of them? What if, since childhood, signs have been revealing your divine purpose, but you either ignored them or failed to recognize what they truly meant? Think back to your childhood. Remember those moments when you felt different, when your sensitivity seemed like a weakness, when your perspective made others uncomfortable, when you had dreams that seemed too big for a child. The world taught you those things were problems to overcome. But what if they were actually indicators, divine markers pointing to why you were placed on this earth? Look around you now. At your age, most people are winding down, focusing on comfort, security, retirement. Yet something in you still burns, a question that never quite got answered, a purpose that never quite got answered, a purpose that never fully materialized. That burning isn't accidental. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 7 unmistakable signs that have been present in your life since childhood, signs that most people completely miss. Understanding these signs now, even in your 50s or 60s, could completely transform not just your remaining years, but your understanding of everything you've already lived through, every struggle, every victory, every seemingly random event. What if none of it was random at all? If you've ever sensed the deeper calling, that feeling that your life was meant for something beyond the ordinary, type chosen in the comments right now. It's a small act of recognition, but sometimes recognition is where transformation begins. Many watching this will feel an immediate resonance with what I'm saying, like someone is finally putting words to something you felt your entire life. That's not coincidence, that's confirmation. Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover is knowledge that many live their entire lives without ever discovering. And once you learn these truths, I promise you will never see your life, past, present, or future, the same way again. Part 1. The Divine Blueprint. Have you ever looked at your child's drawings and seen something that took your breath away, not because of skill, but because of what it revealed? What if I told you that God does the same with you? That before your first breath, He sketched out your entire purpose. He sketched out your entire purpose. What if everything you've dismissed as coincidence has actually been divine fingerprints across the pages of your life? Think back to your childhood bedroom, the walls that witnessed your earliest dreams. Remember what you wanted to be when you grew up, not the answer you gave to please your parents or teachers, but that whispered longing that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than thought. For me, it was age 7. My grandmother's Bible lay open on her worn kitchen table, sunlight streaming through lace curtains, dust particles dancing in the light. I remember tracing my finger across words I couldn't fully understand, yet feeling something inexplicable, a recognition. It was as if something inside me remembered something I had never been taught. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. These aren't just beautiful words. They're the revelation of a divine reality that most people live their entire lives without grasping. Your purpose was decided before your first heartbeat. Look at your hands for a moment. the unique swirls of your fingerprints. Science tells us no two patterns are alike among the billions who have walked this earth. But have you ever asked why? Why would the Creator craft such intricate uniqueness if you were meant to simply blend in, to follow the same generic path as everyone else? Many of you watching now are in your 50s and 60s, decades into careers, families built, mortgages nearly paid. Society says this is the time to coast, to prepare for retirement, to shrink your vision. But that persistent emptiness, that question that never quite got answered, it's still there, isn't it? Because time doesn't erase purpose. Let me tell you about David. Not yet the king, not yet the giant. Slayer, just a shepherd boy. Overlooked, underestimated. The prophet Samuel came to his father's house seeking Israel's next king, and everyone, including David's own father, assumed it must be one of his older, stronger brothers. They didn't even bother calling David in from the fields. But God spoke to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." What the world dismissed, God had already anointed. How many times have you felt overlooked? How many times have others failed to see what burns inside you? How many times have you yourself forgotten the dreams that once seemed so clear? Here's what you need to understand right now, and this is crucial. What you've been carrying isn't just wishful thinking. It's not midlife restlessness. It's not impractical idealism. It's memory, your soul remembering what was written before time. Listen closely. There is an ancient spiritual principle at work in your life that few people understand. When God places a calling on someone's life, He embeds recognition deep within their spirit. A homing signal that can be muffled but never silenced. That's why certain dreams have followed you for decades. That's why specific ideas keep returning, no matter how many times you dismiss them. They're not just thoughts, they're echoes of your blueprint. But here's the warning that changes everything, and I need you to grasp this with everything in you. The greatest tragedy isn't failing at your purpose. It's reaching the end of your life, never having recognized it at all. Think about that. Decades of your life spent building someone else's dream while yours remained unlived. Hours upon hours invested in pursuits that brought success, but never satisfaction. What if you've been one decision away from stepping into what you were created for? But fear, practicality, or others' expectations have kept you circling just outside it. Right now, in this moment, everything can change. Not because I'm telling you this, but because something inside you is finally recognizing what has always been true. The blueprint hasn't changed. The calling hasn't expired. The gifts placed in you as a child haven't diminished. They've just been waiting for the moment when your accumulated wisdom, experience, and courage finally align with that original design. This isn't about starting over. It's about becoming who you've always been. In your childhood memories, in your unexplainable interests, in the patterns that have emerged through decades of your life, your divine blueprint has been speaking. The question isn't whether you were chosen. The question is, are you finally ready to remember? Part 2. The pattern of early struggle. Have you ever wondered why some children face battles that seem too heavy for their small shoulders? Why your own childhood challenges felt disproportionate, almost as if something was working against you before you even understood the game? What if I told you those struggles weren't random accidents of fate, but deliberate preparation for something extraordinary? Think back to your childhood bedroom. The tears you cried that no one saw, the prayers whispered into your pillow, the questions that burned in your young mind that adults couldn't or wouldn't answer, that sense of being different, of seeing things others missed, of feeling too deeply in a world that valued toughness. Remember that. I want to tell you about Joseph, not just as a biblical figure, but as a child like you once were, a dreamer. Different, marked. His own family couldn't stand him. His own brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into a pit and sold him into slavery. Imagine being that boy, gifted with visions of his future, only to find himself betrayed, trafficked, imprisoned. What was happening to him wasn't just bad luck, it was targeted opposition. The enemy recognizes destiny before the chosen one does. Let me say that again, because this changes everything about how you understand your early struggles. The enemy recognizes destiny before the chosen one does. While others your age measured success by popularity, academic achievements, athletic prowess, the things society values, you were experiencing something different. A refining process, a preparation. And it hurt, didn't it? It set you apart when all you wanted was to belong. In America today, we worship comfort. We've created entire industries dedicated to eliminating discomfort. Yet look at every significant figure in Scripture. Moses fled Egypt as a fugitive. David lived in caves hiding from a jealous king. Esther was taken from her family and forced into a foreign king's harem. None of their paths to purpose looked like the American dream. And here's where it gets personal. What happened to you in those early years? The rejection, the misunderstanding, the struggles that seemed unfair. They weren't random. They weren't random. They weren't punishment. They were preparation for something greater than you could see at the time. I've counseled thousands of people in their 50s and 60s who suddenly realize patterns in their childhood that now make perfect sense in light of what they're being called to do. The sensitivity that made you cry easily, that's now your greatest strength in perceiving what others miss. The creativity that got you in trouble in school, that's now the innovation that solves problems others can't. The independence that made you seem difficult, that's now the courage to stand when others sit down. But here's what most people never discover until it's almost too late. Your wounds became your weapons. Your struggles became your strengths. Your pain became your purpose. Take a moment right now. Close your eyes if you can. Remember that child you were, vulnerable, questioning, hurting. Now imagine pulling that child close and whispering. Those struggles aren't punishment. They're preparation. Everything you're going through is shaping you for something extraordinary. Wouldn't that have changed everything about how you faced those challenges? Now, here's where I must issue a warning, and this is crucial. There is a moment of recognition coming for many watching this. A moment when you'll see the pattern clearly for the first time. When this happens, you'll face a choice that will determine everything about your remaining years. Will you look back at those struggles with bitterness, focusing on what was taken from you? Or will you recognize them as the very experiences that qualified you for your calling? Because here's the devastating truth that few will ever tell you. Many chosen ones miss their moment of activation because they remain trapped in resentment over their preparation season. They never make the connection between what they suffered and what they were being shaped to solve. The world teaches that pain is meaningless, that struggle is failure, that difficulty is something to escape. But in the divine economy, struggle has purpose. Your early battles weren't about destroying you. They were about developing something in you that could not be formed any other way. Moses needed 40 years in the wilderness before he could lead a nation out of slavery. Joseph needed the pit and the prison before he could save nations from famine. David needed his time running from Saul before he was ready for the throne. And you, yes, you, needed every tear, every rejection, every battle to become who you were created to be. The pattern of early struggles isn't random. It's recognition, it's selection, it's preparation. In our next segment, we'll explore how to identify the specific gifts that emerged from these struggles, the unique abilities that were forged in the fire of your early challenges. But before we continue, I want you to do something powerful. In the comments below, simply write "prepared" if you're beginning to recognize how your early struggles were actually preparing you for something greater. I'll be reading and responding personally, because this moment of recognition is where everything can change. The path from struggle to significance is about to become clear. And I promise you, what's coming will be worth everything you've endured. Part 3. The gift recognition moment. Have you ever looked back at your childhood and wondered why certain abilities came so naturally to you? Abilities that the world seemed determined to dismiss? Why did you instinctively understand people's hidden emotions when others remained oblivious? Why could you see connections and patterns that left everyone else confused? What if I told you these weren't random talents or odd quirks, but divine equipment specifically designed for a purpose you've yet to fulfill? I need to share something with you that might explain everything. Last month, I received a letter from a woman named Margaret, a retired school administrator in her early 60s. For decades, she'd built a respectable career, raised 3 children, and checked all the boxes of a successful life. Yet something haunted her. Since I was 7 years old, she wrote, I've had this uncanny ability to look at broken systems and instantly see how to fix them. My teachers called me too opinionated. My bosses said I was disrupting established protocols. My family joked I was born difficult. For 60 years, I felt like I was given a gift nobody wanted. Her letter trembled with 6 decades of accumulated pain, the agony of carrying something valuable that the world repeatedly told her to suppress. 3 days after receiving her letter, I watched Margaret stand before the board of a struggling community outreach program. The organization was weeks from closing its doors after 30 years of service. With quiet confidence, she outlined a complete restructuring that nobody had considered. The room fell silent. Within 15 minutes, these seasoned executives were looking at her like she'd performed a miracle. One board member finally spoke. Where have you been all our lives? The truth. She'd been there all along, her gift waiting patiently for its moment. In the Book of Kings, we find young Solomon faced with an impossible situation. Asked what gift he desires from God, he doesn't request wealth or power, but instead asks for an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. This wasn't a random choice. Solomon was recognizing something already planted within him, a seed of discernment that had been there since childhood. This pattern repeats throughout Scripture and history. The gifts given to the chosen ones aren't randomly assigned. They're purposefully designed for a specific calling. Let me ask you something deeply personal. What natural abilities did you show as a child that didn't fit neatly into report cards or performance reviews? The way you could sense when someone was hiding their true feelings. The way you could sense when someone was hiding their true feelings. Your ability to bring peace to tense situations. The way you could explain complex ideas so simply that others finally understood. Was there a moment when someone looked at you strangely after you did something that seemed perfectly natural to you? That moment wasn't judgment. It was recognition of something extraordinary. For too many years, you've been carrying these gifts like a burden. You've tried to suppress them to fit in. You've wondered why you couldn't just be normal. You've downplayed them as unimportant quirks, or worse, as flaws that needed correction. But here's what you need to understand, and this is crucial. These gifts weren't meant to help you blend in. They were meant to set you apart. In the kingdom of God, nothing is wasted. Not one ability, not one insight, not one moment of your unique perspective. Each was carefully placed within you as essential equipment for a purpose that only you can fulfill. I need you to hear this. The very things that made you feel different, the abilities that seemed out of place, the perspectives that others couldn't understand, these weren't accidents or quirks of personality. They were divine signatures. And now we come to the most devastating realization that many chosen ones face. What if your greatest struggle hasn't been finding your purpose, but accepting it? What if you've known all along what you were meant to do, but convinced yourself it was impossible, impractical, or too late? What if the very thing you dismissed as just how I am is actually the clearest indication of why you're here? Here's something that might shake you to your core. Your gifts often come paired with your deepest wounds. The areas where you've experienced the most pain are often directly connected to your highest purpose. This is why the enemy targets these specific areas, not to destroy you, but to prevent you from recognizing and deploying your most powerful gifts. Let me say that again. Your deepest wounds often reveal your highest calling. That sensitivity that feels like weakness, it's actually extraordinary perception. That struggle to fit into conventional systems, it's because you're designed to transform them. That burning sense of injustice that others call overreaction, it's divine discernment. David carried a shepherd's heart long before he carried a king's crown. His ability to protect, guide, and nurture, skills developed in obscurity with his father's sheep, became the foundation for leading a nation. The question isn't whether you possess these gifts. The question is whether you'll finally stop apologizing for them and step into their intended purpose. I believe we're approaching a moment of revelation, a divine appointment where your years of preparation, your accumulated wisdom, and your unique perspective will suddenly make perfect sense. Everything you've experienced has been building toward this recognition. But I must warn you, the moment you truly embrace these gifts, the moment you stop apologizing for how God designed you, everything changes. Doors that seem permanently closed will suddenly swing open. People who never understood you will either be drawn to your authenticity or threatened by it. There is no middle ground. Are you prepared for what happens when you finally become who you were always meant to be? In our next segment, we'll explore how the persistent whisper, that recurring thought that has followed you through decades, is actually the clearest voice of your calling. But before we continue, I want you to take a moment and consider this. What if the unusual gifts you've carried since childhood aren't random abilities, but divine equipment specifically designed for a purpose that's been waiting for you all along? Everything is about to make sense. Everything. Part 4. The persistent whisper. Have you ever noticed how in the dead of night, when the house has finally gone quiet, certain thoughts return with startling clarity? Why is it that at 3, the same questions that haunted you at age 12 still whisper in your ear at 60? There's a moment in middle age when the world grows strangely quiet. The kids have moved out. The career plateau arrives. The constant noise of building a life suddenly fades, and in that silence, something awakens, not new, but ancient, a whisper you've been hearing your entire life. Let me tell you about Michael. At 58, he had built everything society told him would bring fulfillment. Successful dental practice, beautiful home in Connecticut, 3 children through college. One evening, sitting alone on his back porch, he found himself inexplicably weeping, not from sadness, but from something deeper. I kept hearing a voice inside asking, "Is this all?" he told me. The same question I remember asking as a child staring at the stars. What most people don't realize is that this persistent whisper, this recurring thought that has followed you through decades, isn't random. It's the 4th unmistakable sign you were chosen from birth. In the book of Samuel, we find a young boy sleeping in the temple when a voice calls his name. 3 times he runs to Eli the priest, thinking the old man had summoned him. It's only when Eli recognizes what's happening that he tells the boy, "Go back and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel had been hearing the voice his entire life. He just didn't recognize it for what it was. How many of us have been like Samuel? How many times has that persistent thought, that recurring dream, that strange fascination called to us, only for us to attribute it to imagination, coincidence, or simply dismiss it as impractical? Think about it. That idea that keeps returning no matter how many times you push it away. That cause that moves you to tears when others remain unmoved. That skill or talent you've always downplayed but secretly know is exceptional. You've always downplayed but secretly know is exceptional. These aren't random thoughts. They're divine echoes reverberating from before your birth. But here's the revelation that changes everything. The whisper grows louder in your 50s and 60s, not because time is running out, but because now you're finally ready to hear it. What if everything in your life until now, every success, every failure, every relationship, every heartbreak, wasn't the main story at all? What if they were merely preparation for what you're about to do next? This is the terrifying and liberating truth that few are courageous enough to face. The first half of your life was training. The real mission is just beginning. Society tells you this is the time to wind down, to retreat, to focus on comfort and security. But for the chosen ones, this is the precipice of your greatest purpose. The whisper becomes a shout precisely because the time for action has arrived. Moses was 80 when he encountered the burning bush. Abraham was 75 when God called him to leave everything familiar. Neither of them were chosen for their youth or strength. They were chosen because decades of life had given them exactly what they needed for their true purpose. I've seen this pattern repeat itself countless times. The lawyer who, after 40 years, suddenly realizes his true calling was always mediation, not litigation. The executive who discovers her business acumen was meant to build shelters, not corporations, not corporations. The teacher who realizes his gift for communication was preparation for ministry. The persistent whisper isn't just a thought. It's a homing beacon, drawing you toward what you were created for. And it's been there since childhood. Take a moment right now. Close your eyes if you're able to. What thought or desire has followed you through decades? What calling have you dismissed as impractical, impossible, or too late to pursue? What whisper returns in your quietest moments? That whisper holds the key to your purpose. And here's the warning you must hear. If you continue to ignore it, you risk reaching the end of your life with the most painful realization possible, that you built a successful life, but missed your divine assignment. The chosen ones face a crossroads in this season of life. One path leads to comfort, security, predictability, finishing well by the world's standards. The other path requires courage, demands risk, means stepping into uncertainty, but leads to fulfillment of your divine purpose. The whisper is getting louder not to torment you, but to save you from regret. It's getting louder because time is precious now. It's getting louder because everything you've lived through has prepared you for this moment of decision. What most people never discover is that the persistent whisper contains not just the what of your purpose, but the how. Hidden within that recurring thought is divine wisdom, supernatural insight about exactly how your unique journey, skills, and experiences can create something the world desperately needs. The question isn't whether you've heard the whisper. The question is whether you'll finally have the courage to answer it. And here's the extraordinary promise for those who do. When you finally surrender to that persistent call, you'll discover it's been the voice of God all along, not condemning your past, but illuminating your future, not diminishing your experiences, but revealing their purpose. Not ending your story, but finally beginning it. The persistent whisper isn't a midlife crisis. It's a divine appointment, scheduled before you were born, arriving right on time. Part 5. The Divine Appointment. Have you ever wondered why certain people appeared in your life at precisely the moment you needed them most? Was it really just chance that placed that mentor in your path when you stood at life's crossroads? Or that stranger whose single conversation altered the entire trajectory of your existence? What if I told you there are no accidents in a chosen life? Picture this. You're driving home on a route you never take. Your regular road is closed, forcing you to detour. Frustrated, you stop at an unfamiliar coffee shop to gather your thoughts. The person behind the counter strikes up a conversation. Something they say resonates deeply, almost as if they were speaking directly to your hidden struggles. Months later, that chance encounter has completely redirected your path. We dismiss these moments as coincidence. The world teaches us that life is random, a series of accidents and lucky breaks. But for the chosen ones, there are no random encounters. There are only divine appointments. There are only divine appointments. In the hidden architecture of a chosen life, people are strategically placed, like divine chess pieces, each serving a specific purpose in your development. Some appear for a season, others for a lifetime, but none without purpose. Consider Ruth in Scripture, a widow who followed her mother-in-law to a foreign land. She happened to gather grain in Boaz's field, a chance encounter that led to marriage, which produced a lineage that eventually brought forth King David and later, Jesus himself. What appeared as a random meeting was actually a divine appointment with implications that would echo through eternity. Look back at your own life now, those pivotal relationships, the teacher who believed in you when no one else did, the friend who appeared during your darkest hour, even the adversary whose opposition forced you to grow stronger. They weren't accidents. They were appointments, divinely orchestrated. But here's what most people miss entirely, and this is crucial. And the most significant divine appointments often come disguised as interruptions. The person who disrupts your carefully laid plans, the unexpected meeting that seems inconvenient, the relationship that challenges everything you thought you knew. These aren't obstacles to your purpose, they're catalysts for it. Many in their 50s and 60s look back with regret at relationships they dismissed, connections they didn't nurture, thinking, if only I had recognized their importance then. But I need you to understand something vital. It's not too late. The most powerful divine appointments often arrive in the second half of life, when you have the wisdom to recognize them. Right now, at this very moment, someone is being positioned to enter your life. Someone who holds a key to unlocking the purpose that has been dormant within you since childhood. The question isn't whether these appointments will come. The question is, will you recognize them when they do? This is where many chosen ones falter. They pray for direction but miss the guides God sends. They ask for doors to open, but walk past the doorkeepers placed in their path. Listen carefully. In the coming days, pay extraordinary attention to every chance encounter. That person who keeps appearing in your life. The name that repeatedly comes up in conversation. The individual who seems interested in your long-forgotten dreams. These aren't coincidences. They're divine coordination. And now I must share something that may shake you to your core. Something few spiritual teachers have the courage to tell you. Some of the most important divine appointments in your life haven't happened yet, and they're waiting on your recognition of previous ones. This is the hidden spiritual law that governs divine appointments. Until you honor the significance of past connections, the full power of future ones remains sealed. Many chosen ones reach their later years wondering why certain doors never opened, never realizing they walked past the very people sent to unlock them. Think about that person who's been consistently appearing in your thoughts lately, the one you've been meaning to call, the relationship you've let drift. What if they weren't just a chapter in your past, but a crucial character in your future purpose? Every chosen life contains relationship patterns, divine signatures that reveal your calling, the types of people repeatedly drawn to you, the specific needs you consistently meet in others, the unique impact you have that no one else seems to create. These aren't random, they're revelatory. Tonight, I want you to do something powerful. Take out a piece of paper and write down the names of 3 people who profoundly impacted your life direction. Now ask yourself, what if they were placed there intentionally? What if their appearance was choreographed as part of a greater plan for your life? Then ask the question few have the courage to consider. What if the most significant divine appointment of your entire life is about to occur? Because for many watching right now, in this season of your life, the final pieces are being positioned. The relationships that will activate your full purpose are approaching. The question isn't whether they'll appear, it's whether you'll recognize them when they do. The most tragic words in any chosen life are, "I never realized who you were supposed to be to me." Don't let that be your story. Your divine appointments aren't accidents, they're assignments. And the next one may be closer than you think. Part 6. The season of preparation ends. Have you ever noticed how the most significant moments of your life arrive without announcement? Have you ever woken up on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday, unaware that by sunset everything would change? What if today is that Tuesday? There comes a moment in every chosen person's life when preparation ends and destiny begins. A moment when heaven declares, "It's time." I remember sitting across from Robert, a 63-year-old former executive who had built a successful career in corporate America. Gray-haired, distinguished eyes that had seen decades of boardroom battles. He leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper, and confessed what he'd never told anyone. "All my life," he said, "I've felt like I was rehearsing for something that never began." His hands trembled slightly as he described the strange sense that had followed him from childhood, a persistent feeling that his real purpose remained unfulfilled. He'd built the house, raised the family, climbed the ladder. He'd done everything society told him defined success. Yet here he sat, in the autumn of his life, haunted by the sense that his actual assignment had never started. "Am I crazy?" he asked. "Is it too late?" The ancient Hebrews understood something we've forgotten. They had a concept called kairos, divine timing. Not just the passing of seconds and minutes, but the arrival of the perfect moment when heaven's purposes align with human readiness. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before the burning bush appeared. Joseph endured 13 years of slavery and imprisonment before his purpose activated. Both men might have believed their stories were over, that they had missed their moment. They were wrong. And so anyone who believes their age disqualifies them from purpose.
What if the entire first half of your life was merely preparation? What if everything, your successes and failures, your joys and heartbreaks, your skills and scars, was equipping you for what begins now?
Look at the pattern throughout Scripture. David was anointed as a boy but didn't take the throne until middle age. Abraham received his calling at 75. Sarah gave birth at 90. In God's economy, age isn't a limitation. It's a qualification. It's a qualification. The convergence is the sign. When scattered pieces of your life suddenly begin making sense together. When seemingly unrelated skills and experiences align toward a single purpose. When coincidences multiply until you can no longer dismiss them. That's not randomness. That's recognition. Some of you watching right now are experiencing these convergences. Doors that were closed for decades are suddenly opening. People are appearing in your life who speak to something buried deep in your spirit. Ideas and passions you abandoned years ago are resurfacing with unexpected clarity. These aren't accidents, they're announcements. But here's what most people miss: the critical truth that separates those who step into their calling from those who die with their purpose unfulfilled. The transition from preparation to purpose is never automatic. It requires a decision, a response, an act of surrender and courage that says, "I've spent decades building a life according to the world's definition of success. Now I'm willing to risk it for something greater." This is where many falter. This is where the chosen hesitate, because the world has convinced them that safety lies in smallness. That at their age, the greatest virtue is caution, that dreams are for the young, and their time for significance has passed. It's a lie that has silenced too many. Let me tell you what happened to Robert. After our conversation, he returned to the journals he'd kept as a teenager, pages filled with dreams of creating spaces where broken people could heal, dreams he'd abandoned for a practical career. 6 months later, he sold his suburban home, used his retirement savings to purchase an abandoned building in his city's most troubled neighborhood, and created a community center that has since transformed hundreds of lives. "I've never felt more alive," he told me recently. "It's like I finally started the life I was meant to live." But here's the warning that comes with recognition. With awakening comes responsibility. Once you see the pattern, once you recognize the convergence, you enter the most dangerous moment of a chosen life, the moment of decision. Will you step forward or step back? Will you embrace your purpose or retreat into comfort? Because make no mistake, answering your calling will cost you something. It always does. It may cost relationships with those who preferred the old you. It may cost financial security or social standing. It may cost the comfortable predictability you've worked decades to create. Yet, what is the alternative? To reach the end of your days with the haunting knowledge that you recognized your moment, but lacked the courage to step into it. There's a reason your calling is intensifying now, in your 50s, 60s, even 70s. Because now you have the wisdom that can only come from decades of living. Now you have resources, not just financial, but emotional, relational, experiential, that weren't available to your younger self. Everything in your life has been preparation. Nothing has been wasted. Not the successes, not the failures, not the waiting. The season of preparation is ending. The question is no longer whether you were chosen. The evidence has been there since childhood. The question is whether you will finally say yes to what you were chosen for. What will you decide? Part 7. The courage to embrace. Have you ever stood at the edge of your own life, looking back at decades of choices, and wondered if you've been living someone else's story? Have you felt that strange ache in your chest when you see others living with purpose, while you've spent years building a life that looks successful but feels hollow? What would you do if you discovered right now that everything you've experienced was preparation for a purpose you've been avoiding? I remember meeting David, a 62-year-old former executive who had made it by every conventional measure. Corner office, vacation home, respected in his community. Yet when I sat across from him at that coffee shop, his eyes revealed what his resume couldn't. A profound emptiness. I did everything right, he told me, his voice barely audible over the cafe noise. I followed every step society laid out: college, career, family, retirement planning. But now that I'm here, he gestured vaguely at his surroundings, I feel like I've been building someone else's dream. His story isn't unique. It's the silent epidemic of our generation. Society tells you this is the time to slow down, to focus on comfort and security, to wind down, to step aside for younger generations, to shrink. But for the chosen ones, this is the time of your greatest impact. In the ancient text, we find Moses, a man who spent 4 decades in hiding, 4 decades running from his calling. At 80 years old, when society would have discarded him as irrelevant, he stood before the burning bush and finally embraced his purpose. It wasn't his prime years that changed history. It was his final chapter. Think about this deeply. Moses wasn't called despite his age. He was called because of it. Everything that came before, the palace education, the wilderness years, the failures, the obscurity, was necessary preparation. What if your greatest contribution isn't behind you? What if everything you've lived through was equipping you for what comes next? The 7th and most crucial sign is divine discontent. That growing certainty that you cannot continue living below your calling, that your remaining years must count for something greater. It's not midlife crisis, it's midlife awakening. But here's what few understand about divine calling. It requires courage unlike anything else. The kind of courage that makes facing mortality seem easy by comparison, because embracing your purpose isn't just about doing something new. It's about dying to who you've pretended to be. When I work with people in their 50s and 60s who are awakening to their true purpose, they all face the same terrifying question. If I step into this now, what will people think? Will they see me as unstable, irresponsible, having some kind of breakdown? This fear is the final guardian at the gate of your destiny. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is the secret that separates those who finish their lives with purpose from those who die with regret. The calling never goes away. You can ignore it, you can numb it, you can rationalize why now isn't the right time. But it will haunt you until your final breath. The world around you will offer 1,000 reasons to ignore it. Financial security, what others might think, the comfort of the familiar, the risk of failure this late in life. But I want you to consider something that few ever realize. The opposite of courage isn't fear, it's conformity. The true tragedy isn't failing at your purpose. It's succeeding at something that was never yours to begin with. Every major figure in Scripture who answered their calling late in life faced this exact moment of decision. Abraham was elderly when called to leave everything familiar. Sarah laughed at the impossibility of her purpose. Elizabeth and Zechariah had given up hope before their greatest contribution to history. They all faced the same crossroads you face now. The question isn't whether you were chosen. The evidence has been there since childhood. The question is whether you will finally say yes. In this critical moment, you must understand something profound. Your age isn't a limitation, it's a qualification. The wisdom you've gained, the networks you've built, the perspective you've earned, these aren't accidents. They're equipment, carefully assembled over decades for what comes next. What if everything that felt like a detour was actually the path? I've seen people in their 70s start movements that changed communities. I've watched men, women in their 60s finally embrace artistic gifts they'd suppressed since childhood and create work that touched thousands. I've witnessed professionals leave 40-year careers to serve causes that healed generational wounds. They all share one thing. They refuse to believe their purpose had an expiration date. Today you stand at a crossroads. The path behind you is clear. You can see every step, every achievement, every mistake. The path ahead remains shrouded. Embracing it requires letting go of the identity you've built and stepping into the unknown. This is your burning bush moment, your divine appointment with destiny. What will you choose? Will you continue ignoring the signs that have followed you since childhood? Or will you finally step into the purpose for which you were created? The world doesn't need more comfortable retirees. It needs awakened elders who understand that they were created for impact. Your time isn't running out. It's finally arriving. Part 8. The path forward. Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision so significant that your entire body trembled with both fear and anticipation? What if I told you that the moment you're in right now, this exact second, is that precipice? What if everything you've experienced up to this point was merely preparation for what comes next? I remember meeting William, a 62-year-old former executive who had done everything right by society's standards. Corner office, vacation home, grandchildren, retirement fund. Yet there he sat across from me, eyes hollow, confessing that he'd lived someone else's definition of success. "I feel like I've been reading a script written for another man," he whispered. "And now, with fewer years ahead than behind, I'm terrified it's too late to live my own story." Is that you? Have you spent decades building a life that looks successful from the outside while that persistent whisper, the one that's followed you since childhood, continues to say, "This isn't it"? The world has a name for what you're feeling. They call it crisis, regret, the inevitable disappointment of aging. But what if they're wrong? What if they're wrong? What if what you're experiencing isn't the end of something but the beginning? In the book of Exodus, we find Moses, 80 years old, standing before a burning bush. 80. Let that sink in. For 8 decades, this man lived a life that wasn't fully aligned with his purpose. 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, learning the ways of power. 40 more in the wilderness, learning the ways of God. And only then, at an age when most have long retreated from significance, did his true calling activate. The world would have told Moses, "You're too old. It's too late. Stay comfortable. Accept your limitations." But God said, "Now is the time." Everything before was preparation. I need you to understand something profound. Your timeline is not random. The seeming delays, the seasons that felt wasted, the decades spent gathering experiences that didn't seem connected. None of it was accidental. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. because this might be the most important revelation you receive today, the very things that made you feel out of place throughout your life. Your unusual sensitivity, your different perspective, your inability to fully conform. These weren't flaws to overcome. They were divine markers, signposts pointing to your true purpose. Do you know what happens when a chosen one finally recognizes their calling? Everything shifts, not just internally, but in the physical world around them. Doors that remained locked for decades suddenly open. People appear with exactly the connections you need. Resources align. It's as if the universe itself has been waiting for your recognition. But here's the warning I must give you, and this is crucial. With recognition comes responsibility. The moment you acknowledge your purpose, opposition intensifies. The enemy of your destiny knows that an awakened chosen one is dangerous, because one person walking in divine purpose can impact thousands. Are you ready for that? Are you willing to face resistance unlike anything you've experienced before? This is where many turn back. They glimpse their calling, feel the weight of it, and retreat to comfort, to safety, to the script society handed them. But not you. Not anymore. I can see it in your eyes as you're listening right now. That spark of recognition, that mixture of fear and exhilaration. Your spirit knows what your mind is just beginning to understand. You were made for this moment. Consider Ruth, who lost everything, husband, homeland, security, before discovering her true purpose. Or David, who spent years hiding in caves, running for his life before stepping into his destiny. Their stories, like yours, weren't linear ascensions to purpose. They were messy, complicated journeys with valleys and peaks, deserts and oases. The question isn't whether you have a divine purpose. The signs have been there since childhood. The question is, will you finally embrace it? Here's what happens next, and this is where everything changes. First, you must acknowledge the truth. Not just intellectually, but with every fiber of your being. Say it out loud. I was chosen for a specific purpose. The signs have been there my entire life. I'm ready to step into it now. Second, you must release the expectations, identities, and securities that have kept you bound to a lesser story. This is your Egyptian palace, your comfortable captivity. Walking away feels like madness to everyone watching. Let them think what they will. Third, and this is where most falter, you must take action before you feel ready. Purpose doesn't fully reveal itself to the hesitant observer. It unfolds to the courageous participant. I need you to understand something that changes everything. Your age isn't a limitation. It's a qualification. The wisdom you've gathered, the experiences you've accumulated, the perspective you've gained. These weren't detours from your purpose. They were prerequisites for it. Do you realize what this means? Everything you've been through, every struggle, every victory, every moment that seemed disconnected from your real life was actually preparation for what you're stepping into now. The world says your most impactful years are behind you. God says they're just beginning. So I ask you now, as we stand together at this crossroads, will you continue living the script that was handed to you? Or will you finally, after all these years, step into the story that was written for you before time began? This isn't just another inspirational moment that fades by tomorrow. This is your divine appointment. This is the burning bush in your wilderness. This is your recognition point. The path forward isn't just about what you do next. It's about who you become in the process. The chosen one, finally awakened to their purpose, finally aligned with their destiny. What if everything, absolutely everything, has led to this moment? Type awakened in the comments if you feel that unmistakable resonance, the divine recognition stirring within you. You're not alone in this awakening, and what comes next will change everything. The preparation is complete. The awakening has come. Now the purpose begins, the sacred conclusion, your divine purpose awaken. As we draw our journey to a close, I want you to remember these essential truths that we've uncovered together. The signs of your divine selection have been present since childhood. Your unusual sensitivity, your different perspective, your inability to fully conform to the world's expectations. These weren't flaws to overcome, but divine markers pointing to your true purpose. Your struggles weren't random. Your timeline wasn't accidental. Every experience, even the painful ones, was preparation for this moment of recognition. Your age isn't a limitation. Your age isn't a limitation. It's a qualification. You now possess exactly what you need to fulfill what was written over your life before birth. I need you to hear this clearly. You are not alone in this awakening. God hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't moved on to younger vessels or more promising candidates. In fact, it's often in the second half of life that the most profound callings activate. Moses at 80, Abraham at 75, Elizabeth well beyond childbearing years. God's timeline rarely matches the world's expectations. And beyond the divine presence that walks with you, there is a community, right here, of fellow chosen ones who are experiencing the same recognition. People who, like you, spent decades feeling out of place before finally understanding why. Look at the comments below. These are your brothers and sisters in purpose, ready to pray with you, encourage you, and witness your emergence. So I ask you now, what if the remainder of your life, whether that's 5 years or 30, holds more purpose, more impact, and more divine fulfillment than all your previous decades combined? What if everything until now was merely preparation for what comes next? Let us pray together. Father, I stand before you with this precious soul who has finally recognized the calling you placed on their life so long ago. The signs were always there, but now the understanding has come. I ask you to confirm this awakening with divine appointments, with supernatural provision, with unmistakable direction. Lord, remove every barrier, whether external circumstances or internal fears, that would prevent them from stepping fully into their purpose. Replace uncertainty with clarity. Replace hesitation with courage. Replace hesitation with courage. Replace isolation with divine connection. For those facing opposition as they embrace their calling, I ask for supernatural strength. For those who feel it's too late, I ask for divine perspective on time. For those who don't know where to begin, I ask for a clear next step to be revealed before this day ends. May the remainder of their years be marked by purpose so profound that it transforms not only their life, but the lives of countless others. May they look back at this moment as the divine appointment that changed everything. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this message has spoken directly to your heart, if you feel that unmistakable resonance of truth, please type "chosen" in the comments below and share one sign from your childhood that you now recognize as part of your divine marking. I'll personally read as many as I can, and our community will stand with you in prayer. For those still wrestling with doubt, still wondering if this message truly applies to you, I invite you to simply ask this question in prayer. Lord, show me the truth about my calling. Then watch closely in the coming days. The confirmation will come. If you know someone else who needs this message, someone who has always seemed different, who struggled to find their place, who senses there's more to their life than what they've lived so far, please share this video with them. You might be the divine appointment they've been waiting for. Before you go, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do so now and turn on notifications. What we've covered today is just the beginning. In our next message, we'll explore how to translate your awakening into practical steps of purpose. Thank you for staying with me through this journey of discovery. Remember, the world says your most significant years are behind you. God says they're just beginning. The preparation is complete. The awakening has come. Now your true purpose begins.